Dang. Call me so I can make it juicy for you.
Yo guys, what's going on? Willie here, super excited to bring you today's video, which is how to use awakenings on Udyr. So if you guys don't know, Udyr got reworked this year, and with it there's a whole lot of excitement, but there's also a whole lot of new mechanics that need to get addressed. More specifically, the awakenings, which if you guys are returning to the game like I am, the easiest way I can describe them, it's essentially like Rengar empowered effects, where after a certain amount of time, after a certain amount of auto attacks, you can strategically choose which ability to enhance. Now, with this new layer of mechanics comes a whole slew of questions, such as what awakenings are strong? When should I use my awakenings? At what point in the game is one better than the other? In what build is one better than the other? Should I even use my awakenings? And so the answer to the last one is obviously yes, but hopefully I will address that question and many, many more in this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into a practice tool. All right, for this first part, what I actually want to end up doing is go into a practice tool and break down the fundamentals. And even if you think you know how the fundamentals work, a lot of you guys probably do, but there's more depth to it than I think people realize, so please bear with me if you think you already know how this works. So essentially, the awakening is now the new passive, right? If we just read it, essentially it means every time you swap stances, you're going to be able to get increased attack speed, and it's going to reduce the cooldown of your awakening. If I press Q, you see I'm going to get this little icon that hovers around it, right? The important thing to note is that pressing your awakening does not mean you need to stay in that stance to get the effects. What do I mean? So if we look at my current bar right here, you see I've got this number 2. I've got 2 auto attacks queued up that are going to apply Tiger on hit procs, right? 1, 2. Great. And if I press Q again, now I've got 2 more. Amazing. But now I'm not doing anything bonus with my Tiger stance. And the way that Riot balanced the new Udyr is they're trying to encourage you not to stay in one stance and to constantly swap in and out. Why did they do that? Well, if we think about it, not only does swapping to other stances and auto-attacking in those stances reduce the cooldown of your awakening, but you really only get the effects from your stances on the first 2 auto-attacks. And that is the first big point that I want to address today. Constantly switch your auto attack cycles and your stances when you're fighting people. And the reason we do this is because we're trying to reduce the awakening cooldown. We auto attack twice, we get this little Q icon, and if I reactivate it, I get bonus effects. So in this case, I get what's called the Tiger Lightning, right? It does a lot of damage when targets are isolated, and it does a lot of damage that is magic-based percent HP damage, right? So what does this mean? This means Awakening Q is the best ability in the game if you're fighting isolated targets, regardless of how many points you have in it. It's good when you're building AD, it's good when you're building AP because the percent HP magic damage scales off AP too. It is also worth noting that this works on dragons and Rift Heralds. So if you're playing attack damage Tiger in particular, you can absolutely fry dragons and Rift Heralds super fast because they're isolated targets, right? Now, the other thing that I want to go ahead and get out there up front, this will carry over to every other stance, is you don't have to, after I reactivate my awakening, I can go into W or E or any other stance and I will still get the auto attack effect from my awakening Q on my all other abilities. What does that mean? That means once I use Awakening Q, I don't have to stay in Q to get the effect anymore. While it is advantageous to stay in Q because it's going to allow you to reduce the cooldown of your Awakening, it is not going to allow you to get potentially a shield or a stun or an R slow, right? When you are fighting somebody, you have a decision to make. Do you want to play for the extended fight and reduce the cooldown of your Awakening as fast as possible? Or do you want to cycle out of your stance to get the other effects, but sacrifice 2 auto attacks worth of contributions to reducing your awakening cooldown? So every time I auto attack somebody and I swap stances, so here's my 2 W auto attacks, right? It's reducing the cooldown of my awakening. Same goes even for bear stance. When you reactivate your awakening, if you watch my cooldown here, so I've got my awakening up, I can press Q and you're going to notice each of those auto attacks reduce the cooldown of my awakening. Through the magic of editing, now my awakening is back up, and so the alternative that you can do is, let's say I go into Q, I press my awakenings. Instead of wasting my 2 auto attacks, I can actually go into W, right? And I can get the effect from shield and still apply the proc from isolation awakening Q. This is the big strategic decision you have to make. Do I want to be as efficient and play for extended fights, or am I trying to burst people down and be less efficient but make myself as strong as possible, as fast as possible? Here's a quick run through of what each awakening does. Awakening Q gives you extra attack speed on top of the attack speed your Q already gives you, and does bonus damage to isolated targets. W gets you a little mini Mundo ult, heals you for a certain amount of time passively, and gives you a very, very big shield. Your E makes you immune to immobilizing and disabling effects. We will get into this in a second. E is only good for utility. Every other one of these awakenings gives you combat stats. E is just a utility. Your R creates a giant AoE, and the easiest way I can do it is going to go to the nearest target. So if I press R again, it's going to do this. It's going to track your target, slow everything, and create a giant AoE. It also provides vision. So when you should use your abilities are, the target is isolated, always use Q, regardless of how many points you have in it. Your Awaken W should only be used if you're building tanky. I touched on this in my last video, but Awaken W is a really, really weak awakening. Even if you're building raw attack damage, the only time it really makes sense is if you have 3 points in it and you also have some resistances. At that point, I would strongly recommend using your Awaken W unless you know you can burst somebody down. Awaken E is only good team fights where you need to escape or when you're trying to gank early game. It is one of the hardest counters in the game to champions like Zoe, Bard, champions that want to CC you with a single ranged ability. With your Awaken E, you can run in a straight line at them and not worry about getting stunned. Awaken R is really, really powerful in the early game for kiting, but not for damage. Once you get a Demonic Embrace, however, if you're playing Phoenix, I would strongly recommend trying to use it for the purposes of doing damage. Notably, and I'm actually going to hop around in the practice tool here, in my experience, here are the best places to use your Awakening R. It's during these fights with Rift Heralds and Dragons, because you can drop your Awakening R in the pit. The entire team is going to get slowed and do massive damage. It's really good over here in the Dragon Pit. It's good if you're fighting in this choke point. It's really, really good in this choke point because you can block off literally the whole choke point, right? No one can get through there without walking through your slow. It is also extremely powerful when you're running away from enemy champions and you need to slow multiple players at once to get you off of you. Now, in practice, let's look at some examples of when I use my awakenings and why I'm using them. Udyr's whole identity is he doesn't have a gap closer, so you need to strategically use your awakenings to overcome that weakness, and that will be kind of a big theme that you see throughout the clips that we watch. So in these clips, what we're going to do is we're going to go QWER. This clip right here, Awaken Q, I just kind of want to show off how insanely strong it is. This is a clip where I should have died but didn't, just because of the isolation damage. In a follow-up, just rule of thumb, if you have isolated targets, use Q. Here's me soloing Baron. You'll notice I don't have any armor on my kit. All I have is damage and Ravenous Hydra for sustain. Awaken Q is so good. Next ability is W. I actually featured this in my video yesterday. Just look at the shields. Over the course of this fight, I think I press Awaken W 3 times. I don't die. I'm constantly sustaining. Awaken W is the best ability late game. If you're tanky and you can constantly spam it, please use your Awaken W because results are hilarious. There's no other two ways about it. It's so funny. So this is Awaken E. Awaken E allows you to run in straight lines at Zoe. I had this clip at the beginning of the video. Use your Awaken E primarily against enchanters or when you need to engage. Once again, E is really, really bad. It's all utility. It's good in ganks like this where there's champions like Bard that only have one range CC. It's good against Lux. Stuff like that. Awaken R is good for the purposes of kiting. So here's a clip where I should have died but didn't. No other ability would have saved me there except Awaken R. And here's another just demonstration. I don't have Demonic Embrace in this clip. Look how effective Awaken R is at AoE. Imagine if I actually had a damage for that last clip. So with that being said, that's all I've got today. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the likes button, please hit the subscribe, help me grow. In addition, if you have ideas for future content, please leave them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to deliver upon them. With that being said, that's all I got, guys. I'll see you in the next one.
I would never stop like I'm running from the cops.